God reveals his promises in Proverbs 3:5-6 when we learn to trust. There are seasons when life feels uncertain in ways that are hard to explain. You keep moving, keep trying, keep praying, but deep inside, something feels unsettled. You want to trust God, but your heart still wrestles with questions. You ask him for direction, yet the road ahead looks blurry. You ask for peace, yet your mind keeps returning to the same worries. You tell yourself to be strong, but some days, strength feels far away. Maybe that is where you are right now. Maybe you are carrying decisions you do not know how to make. Maybe you are tired of trying to understand everything before taking the next step. Maybe your heart has been quietly asking, God, what do I do when I cannot see where this is going? How do I trust you when nothing around me feels certain? And in the middle of that inner tension, God speaks with a simplicity that reaches deeper than fear. He does not begin by explaining every detail. He begins by calling your heart back to trust. Proverbs 3:5-6 is not just a beautiful verse for difficult days. It is a divine invitation for every soul that feels tired of leaning on its own strength. It is a promise for the one who has been trying to carry too much alone. It is a light for the person who needs direction, peace, and reassurance that God is still leading, even when the path is unclear. Today, God may be revealing something your heart desperately needs to remember. You do not have to understand everything to be led by him. You do not have to see the whole path to take the next faithful step. And when you truly learn to trust him, his promises begin to shine in places where fear once lived. Because there is something powerful hidden in these words, something that can calm your soul, steady your heart, and change the way you walk through uncertainty. And maybe today, God wants to reveal that promise to you. The hidden weariness of a heart, trying to hold everything together. There is a kind of exhaustion that does not always show on the outside. It is possible to smile, keep going, answer people kindly, fulfill responsibilities, and still carry a deep inner heaviness that no one else can see. It is possible to believe in God and still feel tired. It is possible to pray and still wrestle with uncertainty. It is possible to love the Lord and still find yourself standing in moments where your heart quietly whispers, I do not know how to carry this anymore. That kind of weariness is often born in the hidden places of the soul. It happens when you have been trying to be strong for too long, when you have been thinking through every possible outcome, when your mind keeps searching for answers that never seem fully clear, when you want peace, but your thoughts keep circling the same fears, when you want direction, but every step feels surrounded by questions. And sometimes the deepest burden is not the problem itself. Sometimes it is the pressure of feeling like you must figure everything out before you can rest. You tell yourself that if you can just understand what God is doing, then maybe you will finally feel calm. If you can just predict what is coming, then maybe your heart will settle down. If you can just control a few more details, maybe things will stop feeling so fragile. But that is where the soul becomes tired. Because the human heart was never created to carry the weight of complete understanding. It was never designed to survive on control. It was never meant to build peace by holding every outcome in its own hands. There comes a point when the mind grows weary from trying to solve what only God can lead. There comes a point when the heart begins to crack under the strain of trying to manage what was always meant to be surrendered. And this is where many people live for far too long. They love God, but they are drained. They believe, but they are burdened. They keep moving, but inside they are afraid. They are not running from God. They are just tired of carrying what trust was meant to release. Maybe that describes you more than you have been able to say out loud. Maybe your struggle is not that you do not want to trust God. Maybe your struggle is that you have been hurt, disappointed, confused, or worn down by life, and now trust feels harder than it used to. Maybe you still believe He is good, but your heart has become cautious. Maybe you still pray, but some part of you is bracing for silence. Maybe you still hope, but hope has begun to feel tender and vulnerable. And yet, God is not offended by that struggle. He is not standing at a distance, waiting for you to become emotionally flawless before He speaks. He is not demanding polished faith from a tired heart. He sees the inner tension. He sees the mental fatigue. He sees the way you have tried to keep yourself together while quietly carrying more than you were meant to bear. He sees the nights when your thoughts would not slow down. He sees the decisions that feel heavier than they look. He sees the silent questions you have not even known how to turn into words. He sees the longing beneath your weariness. And one of the most comforting truths in the spiritual life is this: God often begins His deepest work in the places where your strength has run out. Not because He enjoys your weakness, but because when your own understanding starts to fail, you become more able to recognize your need for His wisdom. When your own control begins to slip, you become more aware of how deeply you need His steady hand. When your own answers prove too small, your soul becomes more open to the peace that comes from trusting a God who sees what you cannot. That is why this moment matters. Because before Proverbs 3:5-6 becomes a promise you live by, it first becomes a mirror. It reveals the quiet battle happening inside so many hearts. The battle between surrender and self-reliance, between peace and pressure, between trusting God and leaning on your own understanding. And that battle is real. There are days when leaning on your own understanding feels safer. It feels practical. It feels responsible. It feels like the only way to protect yourself from disappointment. But over time, that posture wears the soul down. It creates a life filled with effort, but not rest, movement, but not peace, thought, but not clarity. God's invitation is different. He does not shame your tired heart. He calls it closer. He does not condemn your questions. He meets you inside them. He does not ignore the burden you carry. He gently reveals that there is another way to walk through uncertainty, one that is not built on mastering every detail, but on trusting the one who already holds them all. And maybe that is the first truth your heart needs today. Your exhaustion is not proof that you are failing. It may be proof that you have been leaning on yourself for too long. Not because you wanted to replace God, but because fear, pain, and uncertainty can make the soul grip tightly to whatever feels manageable. Still, the Lord is merciful. He knows how easily the human heart slips into self-protection. He knows how often we confuse understanding with security. He knows how quickly we reach for control when life feels unstable. And in His kindness, He calls us back from the pressure, back from the striving, back from the endless need to make sense of everything before taking the next step, back to trust, the question the heart keeps asking in uncertain seasons. There is a question that rises in the heart during uncertain seasons, even in the lives of people who truly love God. It is not always spoken out loud. Sometimes it hides beneath daily routines, beneath responsibilities, beneath calm words and composed faces. But deep inside, it keeps returning. Lord, how do I trust you when I do not understand what you are doing? That question is more common than many people admit. Because trusting God sounds beautiful when the road is clear. It feels easier to rest in Him when prayers are being answered in visible ways, when doors are opening, when peace comes quickly, when life seems to confirm that He is near. But when the path becomes unclear, when answers delay, when the heart feels stretched between hope and uncertainty, trust begins to feel like something much deeper than a comforting idea. It becomes a real spiritual decision. And that is where many hearts struggle, not because they have stopped loving God, but because they do not know how to remain steady while facing what they cannot explain. The mind wants details, the emotions want reassurance, the heart wants some visible sign that everything will be okay. Yet sometimes God does not give immediate explanations. Sometimes He gives something that feels harder at first, but is actually far more powerful. An invitation to trust Him beyond what you can currently see. That is the tension hidden inside Proverbs 3:5-6. It speaks directly to the soul that wants clarity, but receives a call to trust. To the heart that wants a map, but is given a shepherd. To the person who keeps asking for full understanding, while God lovingly offers something better than control, His guidance. And maybe that is where you are today. Maybe you have been asking God to show you the whole picture, while He is simply asking you to take the next faithful step. Maybe you have been waiting for all confusion to disappear before you surrender, while He is teaching you that surrender often comes before clarity. Maybe your question has not been whether God exists, but whether you can truly rest in Him when life refuses to make sense. That question matters, and God is not afraid of it. He meets honest hearts there. The first revelation, trust begins where self-reliance ends. One of the deepest spiritual revelations in the Christian life is this: trust in God does not usually begin when everything feels easy. It begins when your own strength starts to show its limits. As long as you believe you can hold everything together by your own wisdom, your own planning, your own emotional control, your own ability to predict outcomes, trust will remain more like a concept than a surrender. It may sound true, it may even feel inspiring, but it will not yet have reached the deepest places of your heart. Real trust begins when the soul realizes that self-reliance can only carry you so far. There comes a moment when your understanding is no longer enough. A moment when overthinking does not bring peace. A moment when control does not create safety. A moment when your carefully built inner structure starts to tremble under the weight of life. And that moment, as painful as it may feel, is often where God begins revealing something holy. He lets you see that your peace was never meant to come from mastering every detail. Your peace was never supposed to be built on your ability to explain the future. Your heart was never designed to be sustained by constant mental effort. God did not create you to live as your own guide, your own protector, and your own source of certainty. He created you to walk with Him. That is why Proverbs 3:5 does not simply say, try harder. It says, in essence, release your weight from your own understanding and place it in the hands of the Lord. That is not passivity. That is not weakness. That is not spiritual denial. It is a sacred realignment of the heart. Trust begins when you stop asking your own understanding to do what only God can do. It begins when you admit, Lord, I do not see clearly enough to lead myself. It begins when you confess, my thoughts are too limited to carry this whole burden. It begins when you realize that your need for God is not a failure of maturity, but the beginning of wisdom. And this is the mercy of God. He does not wait until you are strong enough to deserve His guidance. He offers His guidance precisely because you are not. So if your heart feels tired today, if your mind feels stretched, if your own understanding has left you restless instead of peaceful, maybe this is not the end of your stability. Maybe this is the beginning of trust. The universal struggle, how we keep trying to carry what was meant to be surrendered. So many people live with a quiet burden they do not know how to name. They love God, they want His will, they sincerely desire peace, And yet, deep inside, they keep carrying pressures that were never meant to remain in their own hands. They carry tomorrow before it arrives. They carry conversations that have not happened yet. They carry outcomes they cannot control. They carry fears they cannot solve. They carry responsibilities that may be real, but they hold them as if everything depends entirely on them. That struggle is more universal than most people realize. It happens when the heart slowly starts believing that if it does not stay alert, something will fall apart. If it does not think hard enough, prepare enough, analyze enough, worry enough, then maybe it will be caught unready. So the soul stays tense, the mind stays busy, the spirit stays heavy, not always because the person has no faith, but because pain, uncertainty, and waiting have taught them to grip tightly. And the sad part is that this can begin to feel normal. You can become so used to inner pressure that you no longer notice how tired your heart has become. You can become so accustomed to carrying invisible weight that rest starts to feel unfamiliar. You can become so practiced in self-protection that surrender feels risky, even when you know God is trustworthy. This is one of the hidden battles of the spiritual life. It is not always rebellion. Often it is weariness mixed with fear. It is not always unbelief. Often it is a heart that has been disappointed and is trying not to be broken again. It is not always pride. Often it is simply the human instinct to hold tightly when life feels uncertain. And yet, even with all of that, God keeps inviting His children into something gentler. He knows how quickly we try to carry what was meant to be surrendered. He knows how often we take on emotional weights that His presence was meant to hold. He knows how easily we confuse responsibility with control. But surrender is not neglect. Trust is not carelessness. Letting God lead does not mean you stop caring. It means you stop acting as though His place belongs to you. It means you release the illusion that your constant inner effort can secure what only His hand can sustain. And maybe that is why this verse speaks so powerfully to tired hearts. Because the Lord knows that what you keep carrying is shaping you. And before He changes your path, He often begins by changing how you walk through it. The biblical foundation, what Proverbs 3:5-6 really reveals about God's guidance. Proverbs 3:5-6 reveals something deeply comforting about the way God leads His people. It does not present Him as distant, silent, or unwilling to guide. It presents Him as a faithful God who responds to surrendered hearts. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. These words are simple, but they carry profound spiritual weight. First, God asks for trust with all your heart. That means trust is not meant to live only in your theology, your language, or your public faith. It is meant to reach the deepest center of your inner life, the place where fear tries to speak, the place where uncertainty shakes you, the place where you wrestle with hidden questions. God is not asking for partial confidence while the rest of your heart clings to control. He is inviting you into a deeper dependence, one that reaches the places you usually guard the most. Then comes the second part: do not lean on your own understanding. This does not mean that wisdom, thoughtfulness, or discernment are bad. Scripture never teaches us to abandon wisdom. What it teaches is that human understanding is limited. It cannot see every danger, every delay, every hidden mercy, every unseen purpose, or every door God is quietly preparing. Your understanding can observe the moment, but only God can fully see the road ahead. And then comes the promise: in all your ways acknowledge Him, and He will make straight your paths. That is not a promise that life will become easy. It is a promise that God will lead. He will direct. He will clear what needs clearing. He will align what needs aligning. He will not abandon the one who walks with a surrendered heart. Sometimes we want God to explain every turn before we obey, but this passage reveals that divine guidance often unfolds through relationship, not complete pre-knowledge. You acknowledge Him. You bring Him into every decision, every fear, every unknown. You walk with Him, and as you do, He makes the path straight in ways you could never create alone. This is the beauty of the promise. God's direction is not earned by perfect clarity. It is received through trust. And that means even now, in this very season, if your heart turns toward Him fully, you are not walking without guidance. You are walking with a God who knows exactly how to lead you. The consolation. God is not confused about the path you cannot see. There is something deeply comforting your heart may need to hear today. God is not confused about the path that feels confusing to you. What looks uncertain from your side is not uncertain from His. What feels delayed to you is not forgotten by Him. What seems tangled in your mind is not tangled in His wisdom. You may be standing in a season where nothing feels simple. You may be carrying decisions that seem heavy, questions that remain unanswered, and emotions that keep shifting between hope and concern. Some days you may feel ready to trust. Other days you may feel pulled back into overthinking, trying once again to find peace by figuring everything out. But even there, God remains steady. He does not become lost because you feel unsure. He does not grow anxious because you cannot see ahead. He does not step back because your heart is tired. He is still God over every unseen detail. This matters more than many people realize, because one of the enemy's quiet strategies is to make you feel that uncertainty means abandonment. If the answer has not come yet, maybe God is distant. If the direction is not obvious yet, maybe He is silent. If the path is not clear yet, maybe you are alone. But that is not the voice of truth. The truth is that God can be fully present even in seasons that feel unclear. He can be actively working in moments that feel still. He can be directing your life even before you recognize where He is leading. Some of His greatest works happen beneath the surface, where your natural eyes cannot yet measure them. He prepares hearts before conversations happen. He arranges timing before doors open. He protects you from roads you would have chosen too quickly. He reshapes your inner life while you are asking Him to change your circumstances. He does not waste uncertain seasons. He uses them. And maybe that is why trust matters so much. Because trust allows the soul to rest in God's clarity, even when personal clarity has not yet arrived. You do not need to know everything He is doing in order to be safely led by Him. You do not need every answer in order to be held by His wisdom. You do not need the whole path in order to trust the one who already stands at the end of it. So breathe again. The Lord is not unsettled by what unsettles you. He is not late, He is not absent, and He is not uncertain about your future. The deep revelation. Peace begins when the heart truly decides to trust. One of the most life-changing truths in the walk with God is this: peace does not begin when every problem disappears. Peace begins when the heart truly decides who it will trust. Many people believe peace will come later when the answer arrives, later when the money is enough, later when the relationship is restored, later when the diagnosis changes, later when the road becomes obvious. But the peace God gives does not depend first on changed circumstances. It begins with a changed posture of the heart. That is the deep revelation hidden inside trust. Trust is not pretending everything is easy. Trust is not denying pain. Trust is not forcing yourself to feel strong when you feel fragile. Trust is choosing to place your inner weight in God's hands, even while life still feels unfinished. This is where many hearts are transformed, not when they finally control every outcome, but when they stop asking control to save them. Not when they can explain every mystery, but when they stop demanding understanding before surrender. Not when the storm has fully passed, but when they discover that God can hold them in the middle of it. And that changes everything, because once the heart decides, Lord, I will trust you, something sacred begins to happen inside. The mind may still have questions, but it is no longer carrying them alone. The future may still be unseen, but it is no longer sitting in human hands. The emotions may still rise and fall, but beneath them, a deeper foundation starts to form. A quiet steadiness, a holy rest, a confidence that says, I do not know everything, but I know the one who does. That is why trust brings peace. Not because trust explains the whole journey, but because it reconnects you to the presence of the one guiding it. Peace is born when the heart stops resisting God's place and begins resting in it. Peace grows when surrender becomes more real than fear. Peace deepens when your soul no longer says, everything depends on me, but instead says, God is faithful and I am safe in his hands. Maybe this is the turning point your heart needs today, not a new explanation, not a perfect plan, not immediate certainty, but a deeper surrender. Because the moment your heart truly decides to trust, peace does not wait for tomorrow to begin. It starts there, in that holy surrender, where fear loosens its grip and God's presence becomes greater than the unknown. Living this today, how to walk in trust when fear tries to return. Trust in God is not only a truth to admire, it is a way to live, especially on the ordinary days when fear tries to return. Because even after a deep moment with God, the mind can still drift back toward pressure. You may pray in peace at night and wake up with anxious thoughts in the morning. You may feel strengthened in one moment and then suddenly feel pulled back into uncertainty by a conversation, a delay, a memory, or a new concern. That does not mean your trust was fake. It means your heart is learning a new way to walk. And this is where Proverbs 3:5-6 becomes practical. To trust God today means that when your mind starts running ahead, you gently bring it back and say, Lord, I will not lean on my own understanding. When your emotions begin demanding immediate answers, you pause and remember, you are already ahead of me. When fear whispers that everything depends on you, you answer with truth. My life is not resting in my hands. It is resting in God's. Sometimes trust looks very simple. It looks like praying before reacting. It looks like slowing down before making a fear-driven decision. It looks like refusing to let panic become your counselor. It looks like bringing God into the small moments, not just the dramatic ones. It looks like acknowledging Him in all your ways, just as the Scripture says. That means you do not only trust Him with the big future, you trust Him with today's thoughts, today's choices, today's conversations, today's weakness, today's uncertainty. You invite Him into the places where your natural instinct would normally take over. And when fear returns, as it sometimes will, do not treat that moment as failure. Treat it as another invitation to surrender, another invitation to remember, another invitation to place the weight back where it belongs. You may need to do that more than once in a day. That is not weakness, that is spiritual formation. Trust grows through repeated surrender. Peace deepens through repeated remembrance, and little by little, what once felt unnatural begins to become the new posture of your soul. So today, do not ask whether you can control tomorrow. Ask whether you can trust God in this moment, because often He does not give peace for the entire journey all at once. He gives enough light for the next faithful step. Renewed hope. God's promises are still active over your life. One of the enemy's most subtle lies in difficult seasons is this: that God's promises have somehow become distant, delayed beyond meaning, or no longer active in your life. When the path feels unclear, when prayers seem slow, when the heart grows tired, it becomes easy to assume that silence means absence, or that waiting means God has stepped back. But that is not true. God's promises do not lose their power because your season feels uncertain. They do not fade because your emotions feel weak. They do not depend on your ability to see clearly. They remain firm because they rest on His character, not on your circumstances. That is why Proverbs 3:5-6 is so precious. It is not only a command to trust, it is also a promise that God still leads the one who acknowledges Him. In other words, your story is not being abandoned in the middle. Your life is not drifting outside His care. Even now, while you are still learning, still waiting, still walking through questions, the faithfulness of God is still at work. His promise is still alive over your decisions. His promise is still alive over your future. His promise is still alive over the places where you feel uncertain, weary, and stretched. You may not see the full shape of it yet, but that does not mean He is not fulfilling it. God often works in ways the heart only understands later. What feels like delay may be protection. What feels like silence may be preparation. What feels like stillness may be divine ordering beneath the surface. And when the right moment comes, you may look back and realize that He was guiding you even when you thought nothing was happening. That is where hope begins to breathe again. Hope is not pretending everything is already resolved. Hope is remembering that God is still faithful in the unresolved places. Hope is lifting your eyes beyond the present tension and saying, "The Lord who made promises to me has not changed." Hope is refusing to measure God's faithfulness by today's lack of clarity. So do not let your heart conclude too quickly that the story is over. Do not let fear interpret what only God fully understands. Do not let the waiting season speak louder than His word. The same God who called you to trust Him is the God who knows how to guide you. The same God who sees your hidden fears is the God who keeps His hand on your life. The same God who gave the promise is still watching over it. And because of that, you can hope again. Maybe you came here today carrying more than anyone around you realizes. Maybe your mind has been full, your heart has been tired, and your spirit has been quietly longing for direction. Maybe you have been trying to stay strong, trying to remain faithful, trying to keep moving forward while inside you have still been asking God for clarity, peace, and reassurance. And maybe, through these words, the Lord has been gently reminding you of something your soul needed to hear again. You are not meant to lead yourself alone. The path ahead may still hold unknowns. Some questions may still remain unanswered. Some details may still feel unfinished. But God has not changed. He is still faithful. He is still near. He is still guiding the life that is surrendered to Him. So right now, before you move on, let your heart become still for a moment. Let the pressure settle. Let the striving loosen. Let the need to understand everything step back for just a little while. And in that quiet place, remember this promise again. When you trust in the Lord with all your heart, when you stop leaning on your own understanding, when you acknowledge Him in all your ways, He will make your path straight. Not because you earned it, not because you figured everything out, but because He is good and He knows how to lead His children. Let this be your prayer today. Lord, I give you the weight I have been carrying. I give you the questions I cannot answer. I give you the future I cannot control. I give you the fears that keep returning. I give you the places where my heart has been tired, cautious, and overwhelmed. Teach me to trust you with all my heart. Teach me not to lean on my own understanding. Teach me to acknowledge you in every part of my life. When I want control, give me surrender. When I want certainty, give me faith. When fear tries to return, remind me that you are already ahead of me. And when I cannot see the way clearly, help me rest in the truth that you do. Father, let your peace settle over every troubled mind. Let your presence calm every anxious heart. Let your wisdom cover every confusing path. And let your promises become more real than fear. I trust that you are leading. I trust that you are working. I trust that you have not left me. And I trust that even here you are making my path straight. In Jesus' name, amen.